Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our HSC Masterclass for Studies of Religion, where today we're looking at Moses Maimonides, your significant person who you have studied for Judaism. Today we're going to spend about 50 minutes to an hour looking at Maimonides' legacy. When you're approaching your trial HSC exam and your HSC exam itself, you need to be preparing your essays and your short answers on Maimonides in relation to what his impact has been from the 12th century all the way through to the 21st century today. And what does it mean for a Jewish adherent to be able to incorporate Maimonides' understanding and expression and contribution of Judaism to their everyday living, so that they're living a dynamic faith in the everyday occurrences of their lives. So today we will actually explore Maimonides himself, and we will ask you some questions about Maimonides and that you need to be able to answer as you prepare for the trial HSC and the HSC itself. So Maimonides. All of these names that I have aligned to Maimonides, you need to be able to say why. Why is he a Talmudist? Why is he an innovator? Why is he a codifier? Why is he a religious rationalist? So some homework for you after this masterclass is to be able to dive deeply into these names that you can see on the screen to allow you to be able to comment as to why anybody would call him these names. And for each of these names that he's been called, there is his work that is aligned to those names. So we know he's a traditionalist. The three beliefs of Judaism are obviously in every piece of work that he does or he has done. We know he's a Talmudist. He took the Talmud and he actually worked with the Talmud to create some of his most brilliant work, his magnus opus, the Mishnah Torah. We know that he's a rabbi. We know he was a philosopher, and that came out really, really strongly in his Guide for the Perplexed. So for every one of these names, I encourage you with your teachers and with your fellow peers in class to be able to rationalize why Maimonides would be given these names. And as a result of that, which elements or areas of his work would actually support the names that he is given. Just quickly on that slide as well, we know that from Moses to Moses, there never arose another Moses. Rambam, or Maimonides, has been known for this quote being aligned to him. And when he died, obviously it's something that everybody respected. And when you look at Moses, who was handed the law at Mount Sinai and led his people out of slavery, it is almost stating that Maimonides, like Moses, has led his people through his codifying of the 613 mitzvot, the actual law or the laws that Jews follow every day based on how they incorporate that into their lives according to the stream of Judaism in which they're living. So let's have a look at your syllabus recap. You'll learn about, quite easily, but I want to push you always in HSC to actually look at your learn tos. And you've probably worked with these very strongly in your classes already. But when we look at students learn to explain the contribution to the development and expression of Judaism by Maimonides, okay, we have to be able to relate cause and effect. So that verb is really important. Make the relationship between things evident and provide the what, the how or the why. So how did Maimonides contribute to the development of Judaism? What did he do? If Maimonides is considered to be the leading rabbinic authority of his time, and quite possibly of all time, what did he do to make Judaism a living and dynamic religion then, throughout the centuries, and even now in 2024? And what did he do to contribute to the expression of Judaism? What was his theology? What was his theological stance, his philosophical stance? And what did he establish in relation to ethics, either bio, enviro, or sexual, for your study, practices, so death and mourning, okay, Saturday worship, and also marriage, and rituals? What did Maimonides do from a theological and philosophical point of view so that we could see the expression of Judaism being developed? And then lastly, you have to analyse the impact of Maimonides on Judaism, his legacy, okay, identifying the components and the relationships between them, and draw out implications. So what is Maimonides' legacy for adherents of Judaism from the 21st century right back to the 12th century? So ask yourself, what if Maimonides had converted to Islam in his time? What would not have been done? So what is his legacy? What is his impact? Again, when you're looking at the HSC paper, both the trial and the paper, the syllabus outcomes shape the paper. So do never ignore the outcomes. And it's a really, really good practice to actually look at these 7 outcomes and know that your questions are going to be drawn from them. And I would suggest to you there are some of these outcomes where you can actually look at Maimonides only and be able to really then write a page about that particular outcome in relation to Maimonides. So as a result of Maimonides for H4, describe and analyse how aspects of religious traditions are expressed by their adherents as a result of what Maimonides has done. So remember always to look at these outcomes, know that your paper is going to be based on these outcomes, and be able to answer anything in relation to these outcomes and the significant person who you've studied. This is a bit of a suggestion for how to revise for your trial and the HSC paper when you're looking at the significant person. So I'm suggesting that you follow the 3 C's for the significant person. And the first one is context. So what is the life of Maimonides? And you learn all about his life and what he does, and you know his historical background and components. And you know what has happened to him from the day he was born through to the moment that he died. So this context is important, but we can never answer a HSC question in either section 2 or 3 based only on context. I'm just giving you a few examples of his context. Okay, he lived under Islamic rule. He's known as the Great Eagle, and that's in Hebrew, Hanesha Lagadol. He studied with his father, who was well reputed in Jewish law. He studied the Talmud, the Mishnah, and the Midrash. He believed in learning for its own sake as a young man right through to the end of his life. And in Hebrew, that's known as Torah Lishma. And he was captivated by philosophers in Aristotle and Plotinus. So when you have time, you should know and be able to quote from Aristotle where he aligns with Maimonides, or where Maimonides aligns with him. We know he lived in Cordoba. We know his family struggled under Islamic rule and decided to then flee from Cordoba to Morocco, or Fez. We then know that they had a little bit of settlement time in Palestine, and we know that he finally settled in Egypt. Maimonides had a natural ability to inquire into anything, and he was very, very rational. So reason played a major part in any of his approach to the way he lived his Judaism, but also in the way that he studied it and also organized his work. He had a curiosity about all things. And many will say he is the greatest rabbi of the Middle Ages, a doctor to the Sultan of Cairo, and certainly he was a leader of Egyptian Jewry. So those historical components, the life and background and what happened to him, are really important, and that can be weaved through an answer, more predominantly in section 3 of the paper. So our next C, when revising for your trial, we're looking at C number 2, and it's looking at the contribution. Okay, so this is where your expression and development of Judaism comes in relation to Maimonides. How did the tradition grow because of Maimonides? How were practices understood and lived out because of Maimonides? And what is the survival of what he did throughout the 12th century, right through the medieval ages, through to now a Jew of either Orthodox, conservative, or progressive stream or variant? How are they able to incorporate what Maimonides' work has been right now in 2024? So a few of these points are really nice ones to remember, and also I suppose when there's quotes, you want to be able to weave them well through your answer. And it's known that Maimonides has stated, one should read the written Torah and then the Mishnah Torah. Then he will know the oral Torah in its entirety without needing to read any other text beside. So Maimonides' published works for him were considered pillars of the Jewish canon, but we know his Mishnah Torah had a huge impact on people of the 12th century, Jews from the 12th century, adherents, right through to the 21st century. His commentary on the Mishnah, including all the 13 articles of faith, which are in chapter 10, is a published work and published in many languages, and was his first work. Then we look at his Mishnah Torah, which we know is often referred to as the Magnus Opus, the repetition of the law. 14 volumes. He made complex issues for Jewish adherents simple and straightforward. And the big bonus was that they were all in one place, being accessible and understandable. He gave the ability to adherents over the centuries to understand why the rules existed, the 613 mitzvot, and what they accomplished once adherents lived according to these 613 rules or mitzvot, which made it a dynamic, and still does, and living tradition for all streams. You cannot talk about Maimonides and his work without remembering to weave the streams through your answer. His guide for or of the perplexed, and in many areas of Jewish study, we see the guide listed as guide for or of the perplexed. I've seen it in multiple ways. I would suggest to you that if you are going to talk about the guide for the perplexed, that you do exactly what is on this PowerPoint as well. Put of in the beginning of your answer or wherever you're stating it, so that the marker understands that you know that it is referred to the guide for and the guide of, depending on which area or who you're actually reading. But this guide fortified theology and reason by using philosophy to then explore divinity. That's a beautiful way of summing up the guide. Maimonides proved that scripture and reason could coexist. A lot of theologians, if we call Maimonides that at this moment, struggled with the fact that scripture and reason could exist, and many adherents did and still do. Maimonides proved in the Guide for the Perplexed that these two elements of Jewish life, reason and scripture, could coexist. His Book of the Commandments, the Sefer HaMitzvot, made sense of the 613 mitzvot for Jews. Others studied him. He inspired these two rabbis, plus many more, Jacob ben Asher and Joseph Caro, author of the Shulchan Aruch, the Code for Jewish Law, in their work and for their people. And in the 20th and 21st centuries, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks has had much commentary on Maimonides. I encourage you to actually look at some videos or YouTube clips on what Rabbi Jonathan Sacks says about Maimonides. It gives you a richer background into how Maimonides is approached today for a Jewish adherent. So the whole time we're talking about his contribution, we're talking about his legacy. What if he had never existed? Okay, the work that he had done has improved the quality of how a Jewish adherent lives their lives in many aspects of what makes up current day Judaism and Judaism over the centuries. And finally, the third C, when we're looking at a significant person, is consequence. What if Maimonides never existed? As Jews, what would adherents not know, not live out, not practice, not experience, or not love about their faith? I encourage you to take those words that I've just said and actually answer that. What if Maimonides never existed? How would a Jew live out their lives? How would a Jewish adherent practice their faith? How would a Jewish adherent experience all that Judaism contains? And how does Maimonides' work influence what they love about their faith? What makes them live for their faith and how strongly they live it out? So let's have a look at this. So this is a little bit of work for you to do and answer these questions. I want you to answer the question as in so. So what if Maimonides had never existed? So number one, he was the author of Talmudic commentaries. So what if he had never existed? Would the Talmud be understandable now? And would it certainly be understandable from the 12th century onwards? He navigated parallel and disparate worlds, different worlds, and served Jewish and broader communities. So what if there wasn't someone like Maimonides in the 12th century who had to understand Christianity, Judaism, and Islam and try and bring them either together or understand their differences? What if he never existed at that time? It took him 10 years to complete the Mishnah Torah in Hebrew, all 14 books. What if the Mishnah Torah had never been created by Maimonides? And from Moses to Moses, there never arose another like Moses. So how has Maimonides mirrored Moses, who received the law at Mount Sinai all those centuries ago, creating a covenant between God and his people? So what if Maimonides had never existed? Where does the law relate to Maimonides? And why is he similar to Moses in that respect? Maimonides drew admiration and scorn, controversy and adulation, influence and contention. How? How did Maimonides do that? We know that the Jesuits wanted his books burnt, and they actually did burn both the Torah and or Tanakh, and they also burnt Maimonides' books because they thought they were beyond reasonable expression of Judaism. So why did he have people who scorned him? Why was he admired? Why was he controversial? And then on the other hand, why was he praised? and why did he have so much influence, and how did that happen? And then why did people hesitate over the years and actually review his work and think that they needed to improve it or change it? Equally, he was able to take reason, science, and logic and merge it with faith, tradition, and God, particularly when we're looking at the Guide for the Perplexed. So how did he do this? His work provided a canonical cornerstone for all Jewish life. What does that actually mean? And he was a conserver of tradition, absolutely respecting all the law from Moses right through to him and right up to 21st century now because of his work, but also a daunting innovator. He wanted Jewish adherents, to live a communal life, to love their faith, to be able to practice the laws of living a Jewish life and not feel almost as if it was too daunting for them. So he was an innovator. He wanted them not only to study the Torah, to also understand the Torah. So his Mishnah Torah allowed that to happen. It's important to say that today, as a pilgrimage, Jews travel to Tiberias to visit his grave. And on his grave it says, "May his memory endure forever." Why? What is so important about Maimonides? So you will know what's really, really important about Maimonides through your study that you've done. But you need to itemize what are all the things that make him the significant person for Jews right through to the 21st century. What did he do? What were his works and examples of his works? And you will probably come up with first that he was a major codifier of Jewish law. And we know that. But how did he do that and why? There are a few sweeping statements about Maimonides, and I think these are really, really important for you to be able to answer. Can you explain why people have said this and why I would say this? So the first one is what Heschel actually wrote about him. Heschel is also studied for the HSC, and Heschel had a lot to do with, I suppose, 20th century peace in relation to Jewish adherents and adherents of other traditions. So this is what Heschel himself has said. If one did not know that Maimonides was the name of a man, one would assume it was the name of a university. Maimonides was meticulous in everything that he wrote. He was organized and rational and thorough, and took the 613 mitzvot, took the Mishnah, and actually worked with that to create a book, a work which Jewish adherents of any era and time could understand as to how they live their lives. Each time you're hearing me talk about living their lives, we know the three beliefs of Judaism have to come through your answers somehow, particularly in an essay. So when we're looking at the three beliefs of God, covenant, and divinely inspired law, we need to remember that Maimonides basically exemplifies all three of these in every work that he does, in how he lived his life, in how he continued to be a leader of the Jewish community wherever he was. His writings and achievements from the 12th century Maimonides seem to cover an impossibly large number of activities. What are those activities? Maimonides was the first person to write a systematic code of Jewish law, the Mishnah Torah. So what? So what is so important about that for Jews of each stream for today? He produced one of the great philosophical statements of Judaism, the Guide of the Perplexed, or for the Perplexed, called the Mora Nichibim in Arabic. Okay, what is so fantastic about this work? And Maimonides' Mishnah Torah, his magnus opus, we know they're 14 volumes and they're in Hebrew, accessible and have been translated. And that's important to know about his legacy. It became a standard guide to Jewish practice. It later served as a model for the Shulchan Aruch, the 16th century code of Jewish law that is still regarded as an authoritative by Orthodox Jews. And what does this contain? Where does it fall alongside Maimonides' work? And here we say he was laser focused on the law and how to live out the beliefs of his faith. So some of these things are being stated here. You need to utilize and weave through your short and longer answers. We could also say that he was laser focused on the questions around life and faith. Aristotle, Aquinas, Plato were names that were synonymous with Maimonides. He formulated a credo of Judaism, and Judaism doesn't have a creed, so this was quite interesting, expressed in his 13 Articles of Faith, which is also a reworking of the Yigdal prayer, which appears in most Jewish prayer books. His 13 Articles of Faith are said at the end of synagogue service every morning. So what do his 13 articles say? You need to know out of those 13, a really nice idea of having 4 to 5 really being able to be quoted, but generically what they cover totally. And how do adherents use these today to live as one of the streams of Judaism? Do you know that it's 12th or his 12th statement of faith, I believe with a full heart in the coming of the Messiah, and even though he may tarry, I will still wait for him, was often among the last words said by Jews as they were being marched into Nazi gas chambers. So we've said when they would say this, but why would they say this as well? So for those of you who have studied the Holocaust from when you were back in year 9 or year 10 through units where we're looking for the search for meaning, but you're not studying the Holocaust in year 11 and year 12, it's really, really important to know that Jews spoke these words, his 12th statement of faith, as they knew they were going to die. Maimonides formulated a list of 8 levels of charity or giving called the tzedakah, and they correlated to the degree with which the giver is sensitive to the needs and feelings of the recipient. How is that so important expression-wise when we're looking at Maimonides' contribution to helping Judaism to be a living and dynamic religion? He believes that the greatest level, above which there is no greater, is to support a fellow Jew by endowing him with a gift or loan, or entering into a partnership with him, or finding employment for him in order to strengthen his hand so that he will not need to be dependent on others. So it's a very socially just way of living when we look at Jews being able to understand the 8 levels of giving or charity. And some Jewish adherents would start at level 1, and that is where they're asked to support somebody else. They want that person to know that it's them supporting them, right through to the stage where they're really equipping other people to be able to live their lives in a successful manner. So his impact on the expression as to how they live their Jewish life as adherents of this tradition is quite huge. His writing was clear, concise, and classic, with his works being translated into many, many languages. So every Jewish adherent has an accessibility to his work. And lastly, in these sweeping statements about Maimonides, he made the law clearer and accessible therefore allowing all Jews to remain Jewish according to the beliefs of Judaism. If we're talking beliefs, we have to name them. One God, okay? God in every Jewish adherent's life. Even when we're looking at marriage, God is the third person in that marriage. So you have the bride and the groom and God. From that day forward, they are part of the community and the community is part of their life. The law was made relevant through his guide for the perplexed, bringing reason and philosophy and religion together. He made it easier for Jews to uphold the covenant with their God because he actually took the Mishnah, he took the 613 commandments, and he was able to allow adherents to understand what they meant and how they were actively going to live those laws in their own lives. And then, of course, we extend it by understanding that different streams of Judaism will live those 613 mitzvot in their own different way. He has been studied and influenced other Jewish Talmudists. Joseph Caro is an example. He produced the Shulchan Aruch in the 16th century, which many believe is the ultimate code of Jewish law. But he couldn't have done this without Maimonides. So Maimonides drew so much interest from other theologians or codifiers to be able to allow them to study his work, to be able to create their own and extend upon Maimonides' work. He was uniquely able to draw together the ideas of the Greco-Roman world. So this is this historical context where the Muslim and Arab world and the Jewish world and the Western world came together. Other codifiers of Jewish law were laser focused on Maimonides too. What a legacy. Some food for thought for you, which hopefully you can utilize. It is a bit dense, but hopefully you can utilize just to understand Maimonides even more about his influence. I like this first part and this is absolutely from Jewish Learning, my Jewish Learning. Ask the average Jew where to learn about Jewish law, and you'll probably be sent to the Bible or Talmud. So I'd say the Tanakh or the Talmud, or more predominantly the Torah or Talmud. Once there, you may find yourself a little confused. The Bible, let's say the Torah or Tanakh, includes many laws, but generally offers little explanation of how Jewish adherents are going to observe those laws and practice them. The Talmud, on the other hand, includes an excess of detail, but also incorporates multiple viewpoints, stories, and digressions. And we know that with the Talmud. We know there's the Mishnah, and we know there's the Gemara. So we know that there's going to be digressions and multiple viewpoints. And it is known from a Jewish point of view that Jews will often say, on one hand, we will do this, but on the other hand, we would do this. So that over time has made it very, very difficult in a way for Jewish adherents to live their lives according to Jewish law. So another example would be a person wondering how to light a Hanukkah menorah and what activities are permitted on Shabbat, or what one may eat or is allowed to eat at Passover, or how one should be able to put their marriage ceremony together, or how we'll all have to wade through pages of discussion in order to find answers. Given the Talmud's complexity, scholars have tried to codify Jewish law in an easily accessible format, and Maimonides, Rambam, composed the Mishnah Torah. We've already said it was his magnus opus, his major work, which is a summary of all laws relating to Jewish life. He has made Jewish life understandable through making the law accessible to all Jews and helping them to understand how to live their lives, particularly if they don't have the ability, skills, whether they're literacy skills, whether it's academic skills, whether it's not an understanding of the faith, or even the motivation to access the Talmud. I'm sorry, going back, that's very, very, very important, that final paragraph there, to be able to weave that understanding through your answer when we're looking at the impact of Maimonides, but more important to his expression of Judaism. For all the rituals of Judaism, he explains them so that the typical Jew, I should not say typical, a Jewish adherent of any stream from the 12th century, but more particularly now, the 19th, 20th, and 21st century, are able to understand how to live their lives. We have a little bit of some information about other codifiers. So we've already talked about Jacob ben Asher. Okay, he actually looks at a code that addresses the practical areas of Jewish law. He restricted his discussion to laws relevant to post-temple Jewish life, but he certainly was influenced by Maimonides' work. And then after him, we know Joseph Caro created the Shulchan Aruch, and we're looking at, this is the 15th century. Okay, so it's originally intended as a crutch for those not sufficiently learned to read any other halakhic works. So it gave Jewish adherents an opportunity to understand Jewish law in a straightforward way, with virtually no discussion, very different to Maimonides. Maimonides was able to discuss Jewish law when we're looking at 14 chapters of the Mishnah Torah and his commentary on the 613 mitzvot and his guide for the perplexed and his 13 articles of faith. A Jewish adherent was certainly benefiting by knowing how to live their life according to Maimonides' work. And of course, we have also the author of the Yamshel Shlomo, Rabbi Shlomo ben Ichia, or what we would consider as the Maharshal. He wrote a commentary on part of the Talmud, but he used Maimonides' work and the work of those prior to him to be able to continue how to live, or how to inform a Jewish adherent to live their life according to law. I'm going to jump through this here, but I do want you to go down and have a look at the last two paragraphs here. It has become a familiar joke that every time a person claims to have the last word on Judaism, multiple commentators appear to challenge this assertion. Famously, Maimonides claimed that a person could read the written Torah and then the Mishnah Torah, and from then on know the oral Torah and not have to read another book. So not surprisingly, Maimonides' code did not become the last word in Jewish law, but almost became the vehicle for further commentaries and critiques. And that's a huge, huge influence on how Jewish adherents, particularly those who are codifiers of Jewish law, were able to help assist Jewish adherents to live their lives fully, with the three beliefs of Judaism being central in their lives. Obviously, this impacts on practice and ethics. So if you have a question that's a holistic or integrated question for section 3 of your paper, where it is the essay, and you're asked to write, there's a question that's asking you to refer to and work with at least two areas of your study, Maimonides may be the element that comes in as a third one, because he has had a major influence on ethical thought, philosophical thought, practice as far as living a Jewish life, but he's also had a major impact on ritual, the how to abide by the 613 mitzvot, which tells and informs Jewish adherents how to do everything from a Jewish point of view in their lives. He was a Talmudic expert. So remember, the Talmud is the Mishnah and the Gemara. It's a oral law on seeds, the laws of prayer and agriculture, the laws of seasons, Shabbat or Sabbath, and the holy days, laws on marriage and divorce and the status of women, laws on damages, civil and criminal laws, laws around the temple or about the temple, holy things, and laws about ritual cleanliness, purities. So Maimonides was able to take the Talmud and be able to look at all these laws and be able to explain what they were and how Jewish adherents would live them. His legacy is huge. Do you know that Maimonides believed that certain doctrines were necessary for salvation and therefore published a creed of 13 articles which had never been looked at before? These 13 articles are extremely important. So we're looking at the development of Judaism so that Jews could live their lives according to the law of Moses. So that covenant is really exemplified through the 13 articles of faith. They define Jewish belief, really controversial when first proposed. So people really tore apart Maimonides' work. They were ignored for hundreds of years. They got accepted and included in the Jewish prayer book, the Siddur. And these principles then became widely accepted and were and are almost obligatory in Orthodox Judaism. And you know the 13. Again, I would suggest to you that you know them all and what they're about, but you also need to be clever in understanding that for each of these, as a bit of homework, can I put my 3 beliefs to them? For each of these beliefs, can I actually look at how they're connected? Can I look at my practice and can I look at my ethics and bring my 13 beliefs into those 2 elements of my study and make sure that then Maimonides is a focal point, or even aligned to an area that I want to express more in either section 2 or section 3 of my paper. It's really, really, really important to know that he talked about afterlife, that the Messiah will come and that the dead will be resurrected, because a lot of people struggled with that at the time of Maimonides' life. And it's interesting when you look at there will be no other Torah. The Torah is sacred to a Jewish adherent's life. And Maimonides wanted to make the Torah more understandable and accessible for adherents so that they could live their lives according to the 3 beliefs of Judaism. So just quickly, what were some of his teachings? Man causes his own evil. Observing the Shabbat, we rest, or Jewish adherents rest, for 2 reasons, creation and freedom. So there is a double blessing on the Sabbath, and it's ideas, so it allows people to think about how they're going to live their lives, what they're going to do, what they could do to build the community, what they could do when they're looking at the 8 levels of charity or tzedakah, and how they can live that in their everyday life. And that ties in with well-being as well. He taught about free will and the divine. He taught about to be content with the will of God and divine wisdom. Trust God. Instruction, do not begin with difficult subjects. So Maimonides kind of said that water, there's a risk to water, but there's also a regeneration to water. But we also must start with the easier things to understand, rather than the most difficult ones. So it really, really helps with any ethical issue to actually apply the 613 mitzvot to understand the ethical teachings of Judaism. Maimonides influenced that. He very much taught about community, that friends and family are incredibly important, to help each other, to sympathize with each other, and to love. And his golden ladder of charity always has to be weaved through anything when we're looking at development and expression, his impact, particularly his expression of Judaism. Why do Jewish adherents believe strongly in preventing poverty, in giving anonymously, in giving cheerfully and proportionally without being asked, and to practice each one of those steps of the ladder of charity in your lives, from little children all the way through to older adherents? So, finally, his contribution, 13 principles of faith recited at the beginning and end of each service, depending on the stream of Judaism. The SOR HaMitzvot, topically arranged first ever code of Jewish law, explains the 613 mitzvot, the 365 negative and the 248 positive. Don't forget what you learnt in year 11 to be able to then weave into your answers in year 12, and they were in Arabic. The Mishnah Torah, he was 32 years of age when he delivered the Mishnah Torah. It took him 10 years to do this. He codified Jewish law. He codified the Talmud. He made it approachable in a very organized manner. He was very, very clear on being organized and thorough. In Hebrew, accessible, and each chapter deals with one halakha, one law. It contains biblical but also Talmudic legislation. It also contains laws that cannot be observed until the Messiah comes, therefore making it valuable. Well, it's actually invaluable because Jewish adherents are waiting for that time. You've often heard me throughout this presentation or masterclass say Jews. I would strongly advise you to make sure that you are always saying Jewish adherents, please. His Guide for the Perplexed deals with Jewish doctrine and practice from a philosophical point of view. It provides answers to the everlasting questions of existence of God, creation, etc. It's well studied by Jews, Jewish adherents, and is translated into Arabic, Latin, Spanish, and Italian. It's a beautiful philosophical work. And just some interesting things about Maimonides. Maimonides recognizes that there'll be variations from one person to another, and that sometimes a person may have to overshoot the mean for therapeutic reasons. He really stresses that a virtue is a habit, that it can only be developed by practice. I've really, really highlighted or boldened what is another teaching from Maimonides. Maimonides, like Aristotle, who he just loved studying, stresses that virtue is a habit and that can only be developed by practice. And he also says that a wise ruler will therefore prescribe actions and moral habits that must be repeated until they are no longer burdensome and become part of a person's character. It's really, really important to notice that Maimonides is saying that people must follow the same course in treating it as in the medical treatment of their bodies, which is to re-establish equilibrium. So his ethical teachings in his work are incredibly important too. And he also states that Jewish law doesn't ask adherents to be hermits or to starve themselves or to jeopardize their health. He really looks at good judgment, kindness, and compassion means that We look at the doctrine of the mean. This is very important. He created this, where he looks at there's both ends of the spectrum where people are rigorously strict in what they do and where people will do the extreme. And he is asking in his work for the Jewish adherent to establish a moderate disposition and to understand what that means. And again, it's related to all the 613 rules or laws, or you know them as 613 mitzvot. So let's have a look at some of the questions that have happened over the last few years. In the 2016 paper, section 2, we had a two-part sort of question, which is briefly outline one contribution made by one significant person other than Moses to the development of Judaism. So we're looking at the development of Judaism. So I'm going to outline, so sketch in general terms, the contribution made by Maimonides to the development of Judaism. I might talk about the Mishnah Torah and how that has impacted a Jewish adherent's life. It's 2 marks only, so I'm going to be quite brief. I might talk about his 13 articles of faith and how important they are for a Jewish adherent of any stream over the last many centuries since the 12th century. 2 marks only. Secondly, what impact has the one significant person, Maimonides, had on the expression of Judaism? So what impact? So it's kind of an explain question. So I'm going to look at the cause and effect area here. And it's 5 marks. So I'm going to try very, very hard to look at what the question is. I know the verb is going to be what impact, so it's going to be an explain question. I'm going to look at probably 2 pieces of content that I can actually draw upon for my 5 marker. I'm going to try and quote Maimonides in there as well from his work, and maybe quote somebody else like Jonathan Sacks, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, to be able to express how, right to the 21st century, Maimonides' impact has been quite astronomical. And I'm going to use those really important hinge words for an explain question because of Maimonides' legacy. Furthermore, it can be seen. Thereby, therefore, additionally, I'm going to make sure that I use the language of the explain question or verb really, really well. Section 3 of that same paper had a quote. The world stands on 3 things: Torah, service of God, and acts of loving kindness. And this question is, how does the teaching expressed in the quotation assist an adherent to live an authentically Jewish life? I have to look at my statement or my quote, but I've got both here, and I have to look at which keywords I'm going to be using the whole time through this 20 marker. My verb is really important, so we know, and you know this well, you may not get your typical verb, but you might get your why or your what or how does, to what extent, and you need to be able to correlate your verb and the language associated with that verb or hinge words to the actual question. Make sure you're weaving your content every year. The feedback from the HSC is stating this. Weave your quote, words from your quote, through your answer in an authentic way. And make sure when you're answering your question that you're going to have your thesis really, really well developed. And it's stated from the beginning right through to the end. and make sure that your concluding paragraph is going to be a paragraph that supports both the question and the content of the question, as well as the stimulus. The 2018 paper, question 32, the 20 marker, we have another quote or stimulus straight from the Torah. But from there you will seek the Lord your God, and you will find him if you search for him with all your heart and all your soul, from Deuteronomy, where we know the 613 mitzvot are. To what extent has Maimonides assisted adherents in their search for him? So our search for him is a search for God in their lives. So this question, to what extent you're explaining, is happening on top of basically this verb. So assess means to make a judgment of value, quality, outcomes, results, or size. So what is your judgment about the extent to which Maimonides has helped adherents to be able to search for God, to search for him? And we could evaluate there as well, which both of those verbs are very similar. You are making a judgment based on criteria, or you're determining the values. And you need to make sure that you're using your words, which are going to be evaluative words as a result of. Therefore, it can be seen. There's some really beautiful words that you could actually have consequently. So make sure you've got a really good list of hinge words that can be applied to each of your verbs. From the marking criteria for this year, for Judaism, you had to present, to get a 17 to 20, a sustained and reasoned judgment on the extent to which Maimonides had assisted adherents in the search for him. And when we're looking at Judaism, our three streams need to be weaved through here as well. And you also have to look at those outcomes where you're looking at a well-structured response with relevant and accurate information, and also beautiful terminology. 2022's paper, the 20 marker, explains, so a key verb straight there, cause and effect, how both diversity and unity are expressed within Judaism. Make reference to at least two of the following. So when we're looking at diversity and unity, for me, straight away I would think I would like to do ethics and I would like to do a significant practice. But I would have to weave Maimonides, even though I'm looking at least two, I'd have to weave Maimonides through my answer. Due to Maimonides' Mishnah Torah, due to Maimonides' 13 articles of faith, which are in the Siddur and are stated and prayed at synagogues every day, I'd have to weave Maimonides into this answer. But I'd have to do it very carefully because I do not want to overburden my answer in a 2-unit paper or a 1-unit paper. So I want you to carefully look at a question that is like this. When you're being asked at least two, weigh up which are the best two that you're going to look at and which is an area that you could weave through those answers as well. 2023's paper, last year's paper, we know section 2 had 3 5 markers, and question 27 was, how is the contribution of one significant person, Maimonides, evident in Judaism today? It is a clear-cut 5 marker where you're going to be able to look at the question, look at the verb, use the hinge words associated with that verb, come out with your content, at least 2 areas of what Maimonides has done, which has contributed to Judaism today in the 21st century. How has Maimonides impacted how Judaism is lived, practiced, breathed amongst Jewish adherents of all three streams. And lastly, here it was a 20 marker. How does Judaism guide adherents towards living a better life? Make reference to at least two of the following. So again, we've got a how, so it's going to be an explain, guide adherence, and you'll notice throughout this presentation I have used the word assisted or highlighted the word assisted as well. How does Maimonides help, assist, equip, enable, use those great words towards living a better life? And an example to start with is just understanding, and I shouldn't say just, understanding the 613 mitzvot, understanding how to live the Shabbat from Friday sunset to Saturday sundown, understanding for a young couple, any couple, how to get married in a Jewish way from being either Orthodox, conservative, or progressive. So some final words on Maimonides and his legacy. Monumental figure in Jewish thought, influenced and inspired later philosophers and Abrahamic theologians. Remember, they are Abrahamic theologians of all three traditions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. He had a systematic approach to everything that he did, so that influences and impacts Jewish adherents. He was concise and clear, so he was able or enabled them to be understanding of how they were to live their lives, because we know covenant and divinely inspired law and that belief in God are three beliefs that are the cornerstone of every Jewish adherent's life. He was a doting dad, a doting father, do not say dad, a father, a bereaved older brother, this is the context, a skilled and sought-after physician, a sensitive pastoralist and jurist. Halakha, he knew law well, an influential and protective communal leader. He looked after his people, a rabbinic scholar and an intellectual visionary. He's the guide for the perplexed, showed that reason, science and logic could be talked about and discussed with faith, tradition and God. It wasn't one or the other. He was a caring and brilliant leader in really difficult times in the 12th century who wrote with courage and compassion, and he stood by his people. Outstanding halakhist and commentator on the Talmud, and he had a robust approach to dogma. I really like that Rabbi Yamin Levy has written a book about Maimonides and has studied him quite strongly. And I thought this would be important for you to be able to quote Yamin Levy. He's an educator, rabbi, and academic with over 35 years' experience in communal service. He's already authored 3 books, edited 2, 3 prayer books, 3 Jewish prayer books, and published numerous articles on Jewish thought, Bible studies, Jewish law, social issues. And he is the founder and director of the Maimonides Heritage Center in Tiberia, Israel. So he is saying alone, 800 years after Maimonides' death, his influence and his writings have been huge, as well as what we know about his perseverance and his religious passion, which afforded Jewish adherents, and still does, the spirituality that many have sought in existentialism and mystical texts. Maimonides affords the 21st century Jewish community in the diaspora and in Israel the spiritual and political answers it seeks in an order to ensure the Jewish people remain a unified and pertinent entity. That's really important. And Maimonides was heir to a tradition and culture absolutely committed to law, halakha, yet he could appreciate the possibilities of dialogue with those of different ideas and cultures. So some beautiful quotes from Rabbi Yamin Levy there to support your study of Maimonides, your understanding of him, your ability to write from either section 2 or section 3 of the paper, and your ability to be able to address his impact or legacy, the ability for you to address how he influenced or what impact he had on the expression and development of Judaism. So again, can you itemize or talk about each of these names that we would give to Maimonides and why, and what piece of work would be related to each of these names that we would very, very proudly give to Maimonides? His legacy is huge. The impact he's had from the 12th century through to the modern day Jewish adherent, either conservative, progressive, or orthodox, is astronomical. His Mishneh Torah, his Magnus Opus, has enabled, empowered Jewish adherents to live according to the law that was first given to Moses, where God created a covenant with him and his people. I wish you all the best as you move forward with your trials and your preparation with all areas of your study, and I hope that this has helped you to understand Maimonides' impact and legacy from 12th century Europe through to 21st century the world. Thank you.